Jack Dalton had always lived a quiet life. After leaving the Special Forces, he'd built himself a small house on the outskirts of a quiet town. There were no wars, no battles, just peace. The life he'd fought for had been the one he was living now, a life of solitude. But everything was about to change. It started on a regular Thursday morning. Jack was sitting at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper, when a strange, buzzing noise filled the room. It wasn't the usual hum of his old refrigerator or the sound of birds chirping outside. It was something different, something out of place. He looked up, his brow furrowing. The noise grew louder. It sounded like a radio transmission. A faint, broken voice started speaking through an old, battered speaker in the corner of his living room. Jack stood up, his hand instinctively going to the gun holstered at his side, although he knew it wouldn't be necessary. His heart was beating faster now, a feeling creeping up his spine that something was terribly wrong. The voice, though distorted, grew clearer. "We need a human. Please answer our call." Jack's hand froze above the gun. He could tell it wasn't a joke. It wasn't some prank from a friend or a false emergency. This was real, and somehow it was reaching him. "The Virelian people are in danger. The Zorathians. They've taken our daughters. We need help, please." The transmission was broken, and static filled the air again. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The message was coming from space. There was no doubt about it. He walked to the speaker, pressing a button on the side that seemed to control the frequency. For a moment he hesitated. Who could possibly be out there in the vastness of space needing help, and why him? But then the voice came back. This time it was clearer. "We have contacted many planets. We have failed. Only one species, your species, has the strength we need. Please, you are our last hope." The message ended abruptly. Jack stood still, frozen, staring at the speaker. His mind raced. The Virelian people, the Zorathians. What did it all mean? He'd never heard of these races before. It sounded like a scene out of a sci-fi movie, but this wasn't a movie. This was real. Jack had never been the type to turn his back on someone in need, especially if that someone was as desperate as these aliens sounded. But this was different. This wasn't some battle he could prepare for with his usual skill set. The Virelian people had lost contact with their own military forces. Whoever they were in dire straits. After a few moments of deliberation, Jack decided he couldn't ignore this. His instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had kept him alive in countless dangerous situations. Someone, somewhere, was in trouble, and Jack Dalton wasn't the kind of man to leave anyone to suffer. He picked up the phone and dialed the number he knew would get him answers. Within hours, a series of encrypted messages were sent from a satellite that Jack had once helped maintain during his time in the military. They were directed at a deep space station. Jack didn't know what would happen next, but the call had been clear. Help was needed. The next morning, a strange craft landed in the field behind his house. It was small, sleek, and unlike anything Jack had ever seen before. The outside shimmered with an iridescent glow, and the craft was silent, unlike the roar of jets or rockets he had heard in his time. Two figures emerged from the ship, tall, graceful beings with skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Their eyes were a pale blue, almost glowing, and they wore clothing that resembled flowing robes, yet the fabric seemed to move as if it had a life of its own. Jack's heart raced as they approached. They weren't human, that was for sure. The taller one of the two, a woman with long silver hair, stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded both musical and solemn. "You have answered our call," she said. "I am Lyra and this is Talon. We are Virelian." Jack nodded, still processing everything. "You're aliens?" "Yes," Talon responded. "We are a race from the star system of Virelia. We have lived in peace for millennia. But now our daughters, our future, are in the hands of a race called the Zorathians. They have taken them and will use them to conquer us." Jack's mind was spinning, but he listened intently as Lyra continued. "We tried to fight back. We sent our military forces, but they were destroyed. Our technology is advanced, but the Zorathians are too powerful. We have one last hope, you." Jack swallowed hard. "Me? You want me, a human, to save your daughters?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, you have the qualities that we need. Strength, courage, resourcefulness. We believe you are the only one who can succeed where we have failed." Jack could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had fought in wars on Earth. His strength, his skill, his training had helped him survive. But this was something else entirely. Could he really save alien daughters from an evil alien race? "Why me?" he asked. "Why a human?" You are unlike any of the species we've contacted, Talon explained. You humans are resilient, you can survive in the harshest conditions. You have something that the Zorathians do not understand, heart. The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. His heart. Was that enough to face an enemy who had destroyed entire fleets? He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing: he couldn't walk away from this. He had to try. After a long moment of silence, Jack made up his mind. "All right," he said finally. "I'll help you, but I need to know everything, every detail. Where do I start?" Lyra and Talon exchanged a brief look before nodding. "We will prepare you," Lyra said. "But first, we need to take you to our ship. We will travel to our homeworld to give you the training you will need, and then we will go to the Zorathian planet." Jack nodded, determination in his eyes. There was no turning back now. As he followed Lyra and Talon to their ship, Jack could feel the weight of the universe on his shoulders. This wasn't just about saving alien daughters. It was about something much bigger. The fate of an entire civilization depended on him, a man from Earth, a place he didn't even fully understand himself. But he had always believed in doing what was right. And this was the right thing to do. Jack sat in the passenger seat of the alien craft, his mind still trying to process everything that had happened. In the few hours since he'd agreed to help the Virelians, everything had changed. He had left behind the life he'd known, stepping into a world filled with aliens, strange technology, and a mission far beyond anything he'd ever dreamed. Now, he was headed to a distant star system to rescue alien daughters. It felt surreal, like a dream he couldn't wake up from. Lyra and Talon, the two Virelian ambassadors, sat beside him, speaking in their soft, melodic language. It sounded beautiful, though Jack couldn't understand a word of it. Their ship moved smoothly through space, far faster than anything Jack had ever seen. The ship's interior was sleek and futuristic, with a soft glow that made everything feel peaceful and serene. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling of unease. His training told him to be cautious, to be alert, but what exactly was he supposed to be watching for in the middle of space? Talon turned to him and gave a small smile. "Are you well?" he asked, his voice soft, though there was an intensity in his eyes. He had the same glowing, pale blue eyes as Lyra. They were unsettling, yet somehow calming at the same time. "I'm fine," Jack replied, trying to sound confident, even though his mind was racing. "Just trying to get used to all this." Lyra spoke up from the other side. "You will adapt quickly. We will teach you all you need to know." Jack nodded. He wasn't sure if he believed that, but he wasn't going to argue. It had been hours since he left Earth, and they were already approaching the Virelian homeworld. They had passed through several layers of space, each one more unfamiliar than the last. The stars outside the ship seemed to blur and stretch as they traveled at unimaginable speeds. Jack couldn't understand how any of this was possible, but he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't in Kansas anymore. The ship continued its journey, and Jack tried to focus on the task ahead. He had to save those daughters. The Virelian people had placed their hopes on him, and he couldn't let them down. But what if he wasn't enough? What if he couldn't defeat the Zorathians? He was only human. The Zorathians had advanced technology, armies, and powers Jack couldn't even imagine. What chance did he really have? As if sensing his doubt, Lyra spoke again. "You have the strength of your people. The Zorathians underestimate humans. They think you are weak, but we see your potential." Her words were meant to be reassuring, but Jack wasn't convinced. The Virelian race was ancient and advanced, and yet they were on the brink of extinction. He was just one man, and while he had been trained for battle, he wasn't a superhero. But maybe that's what the Virelians needed, a symbol of hope. Maybe he could be that symbol. Hours passed, and the ship slowed as they neared the Virelian system. Jack's eyes widened as he looked out the window. The planet was a sight to behold. It was a world of vast oceans and green landmasses, surrounded by shimmering rings of dust and ice. It looked peaceful, even in the vastness of space, but Jack knew looks could be deceiving. Beneath the surface of this beautiful world lay a civilization in crisis. The ship descended toward the planet, and Jack could feel the gentle pull of gravity. The ship's systems hummed quietly, and the peaceful atmosphere inside made Jack feel a sense of calm he hadn't expected. It was almost as if the ship itself was trying to reassure him, to prepare him for what was to come. They landed on a large platform, and the ramp descended slowly. Jack stepped off the ship, his boots touching the soft, lush grass of the Virelian world. The air smelled different, fresh, and clean, but it also carried a faint metallic tang that reminded him of the technology surrounding them. The Violians had mastered space travel, but their planet felt more like a garden than a bustling metropolis. Everything was quiet, serene. But Jack knew that behind the tranquility, there was a war waiting to be fought. Lyra and Talon led him through a series of winding paths that led deeper into the Violian capital. The architecture was beautiful, elegant, towering structures made of smooth, shimmering materials. It was a city unlike anything Jack had ever seen. There were no roads or cars, but instead, the city seemed to flow with a natural rhythm. People moved gracefully through the streets, their long robes flowing behind them like the ripples of a gentle stream. They seemed to move with purpose, but there was no hurry, no rush. They passed several Violian citizens who gave Jack curious glances. Some stopped to stare, others smiled in a friendly way. Jack felt a mix of awe and discomfort. He wasn't sure if they were staring because he was a human or because he was the one who was supposed to save them. Either way, the attention was overwhelming. Eventually, they arrived at a large building, one that seemed to pulse with energy. The structure was both organic and mechanical, as if the building had grown naturally from the ground. It was a strange fusion of nature and technology, a reminder of the advanced yet peaceful civilization the Violians had built. Lyra led Jack inside, and the cool, soft light from the walls seemed to wash over him. It felt calming, almost like stepping into a place of worship. Inside, there were several other Violian leaders. They sat around a large, circular table, and Jack could feel their eyes on him as he entered. They didn't speak immediately. Instead, they studied him as if trying to determine whether or not he was truly worthy of the task they had placed upon him. Finally, one of the leaders, a tall male with dark blue skin and glowing golden eyes, stood up. "You are the human who has come to save our daughters," he said, his voice rich and deep. "You are our last hope." Jack straightened, his chest swelling with a sense of responsibility. This was it. This was why he was here. He wasn't just some soldier now. He was the hope of an entire race. He couldn't afford to fail. "I'll do whatever it takes," Jack said, his voice steady. The leader nodded. "Good. We will train you in our ways, teach you everything you need to know. But be warned, this will not be easy. The Zorathians are ruthless. They have conquered countless worlds, and they will stop at nothing to use our daughters as tools in their war." Jack nodded grimly. He'd known this would be dangerous, but hearing it from the Violians themselves made it all the more real. He wasn't just going to fight for these daughters. He was fighting for the survival of an entire civilization. Lyra stepped forward. "We will prepare you, Jack. The path ahead will be filled with challenges, but we believe in you." With that, they began Jack's training. It wasn't just about learning how to fight. The Violians were teaching him their technology, their history, and their culture. Jack wasn't sure how long it would take, but he knew it was essential. He had to understand them completely if he was going to defeat the Zorathians and bring their daughters home. Days passed, and Jack grew stronger. He learned how to operate alien weapons, how to use their technology to his advantage. But what struck him the most wasn't the technology, it was the people. The Violians had lived in peace for so long, and now their world was on the edge of destruction. Their calm, serene way of life had been shattered by the Zorathians, and Jack was the only one who could stop them. As his training continued, Jack's resolve only grew stronger. He had a mission now, one that went beyond just saving the daughters. He was fighting for the Violian future, for the peace they had once known, and for the lives of countless innocent people. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Jack Dalton wasn't going to back down. He was going to save these daughters, no matter the cost. The fate of an entire civilization rested on his shoulders, and he was ready to face whatever came next. The Violian planet had become a place of both hope and dread for Jack Dalton. After days of training, learning everything he could about the Violian people, their culture, and their advanced technology, Jack was finally ready. He had seen the beautiful, peaceful world that the Zorathians were now tearing apart. And he knew that it was up to him and only him to save what was left of it. The Zorathians, with their monstrous armies and their advanced weaponry, had already taken the Violian daughters. Now, Jack was determined to rescue them. The moment had come. The Violian fleet had gathered, preparing to launch a counter-strike against the Zorathians. Jack was not part of that fleet. His mission was different. His mission was to infiltrate the Zorathian stronghold and free the daughters who had been taken. The battle for their future would be fought on the ground, deep within the heart of the Zorathian Empire. The Virelian fleet would hold off the enemy forces in space, but the ground was where Jack's skills would make the difference. Lyra, Talon, and a few other Virelian leaders accompanied him to the launch bay, where a small, sleek shuttle awaited. It was designed for speed, not combat. It would take Jack to the Zorathian planet and deliver him just outside the enemy's stronghold. After that, he was on his own. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Lyra asked as she stood beside him, her pale blue eyes filled with concern. Jack nodded. His mind was clear. He had trained for this. He had prepared for the most dangerous mission of his life. There was no turning back now. "I'm ready," he said firmly. Talon placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Good, you have the strength of the Virelian people behind you, but remember the Zorathians are ruthless. Do not underestimate them." "I won't," Jack replied. With a final nod, the Virelian leaders stepped back, watching as Jack boarded the shuttle. The door closed and the engines hummed to life. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but he stayed focused. The mission was clear: rescue the daughters and return. There was no room for failure. The shuttle rocketed into the sky, breaking through the atmosphere of Virelia and entering the vast emptiness of space. The journey was smooth, but the silence in the shuttle was deafening. Jack knew the dangers that lay ahead, but he kept his mind on the mission. He had to stay calm. If he let fear take over, he wouldn't succeed. After what felt like hours, the shuttle began to slow as they approached the Zorathian planet. The landscape below was bleak, dark, jagged mountains, desolate wastelands, and sprawling military complexes dotted the planet's surface. The Zorathians had turned the planet into a war machine. Jack's stomach tightened as he saw the scale of their operations. This would be no easy task. The shuttle dropped down into the atmosphere, skimming over the surface before landing in a small, hidden valley. Jack wasted no time. He grabbed his equipment, a small but efficient arsenal of alien weapons and tools, and made his way toward the entrance of a massive underground facility, the Zorathian stronghold. The air was thick with tension as Jack moved through the shadows, using the cover of darkness to his advantage. The stronghold was heavily guarded, but Jack had learned the Virelian way of combat: stealth, precision, and the element of surprise. He knew how to move silently, how to stay out of sight, how to strike when the time was right. As he approached the facility, Jack saw the first signs of the Zorathian forces. Large, imposing figures patrolled the perimeter, their armor reflecting the dim light of the planet's two suns. The Zorathians were a fearsome race, strong, relentless, and cruel. But Jack had no intention of letting fear stop him. He had a mission and nothing would stand in his way. With a deep breath, Jack moved forward, keeping low to the ground. His training with the Virelians had prepared him for this. He knew how to disable security systems, how to avoid detection, and how to fight if things went south. But the key was to get in, get the daughters, and get out before the Zorathians could stop him. The entrance was guarded by 2 Zorathian soldiers. Jack paused for a moment, watching their movements, calculating the perfect time to strike. He had no intention of killing them. The goal was to incapacitate them and move on. Jack waited for the right moment, then moved swiftly. He threw a small, handheld device that released a burst of energy, knocking out the guards without a sound. Jack quickly moved inside, using the chaos to his advantage. The halls of the facility were cold, metallic, and sterile. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the silence as he crept deeper into the heart of the stronghold. The air was thick with the smell of machinery, oil, and something faintly chemical. He reached the holding cells where the Virelian daughters were kept. They were behind thick metal bars, their faces pale and tired, but there was a spark of hope in their eyes as they saw Jack. They had been waiting for someone to come for them, and now their savior had arrived. Jack wasted no time. He quickly accessed the control panel next to the cells and used his Virelian knowledge to override the security system. The doors slid open, and the daughters rushed toward him. They were weak from their captivity, but they moved with urgency, knowing that they had only one chance to escape. "We need to hurry," Jack said, his voice low but steady. "The Zorathians will know we're here soon." As the daughters gathered around him, Jack heard footsteps approaching. The Zorathians had already discovered the missing guards. They were coming. Jack's heart raced, but he kept his cool. He knew what had to be done. He led the daughters down a narrow hallway where they would escape into the lower levels of the stronghold. The escape route was risky, but it was the only way out. Jack moved swiftly, keeping one eye on the daughters and the other on the path ahead. The Zorathians would stop at nothing to recapture them. As they reached the exit, Jack heard the sound of heavy boots behind him. The Zorathians had caught up. Jack turned, his weapon raised, ready to fight. He had come too far to back down now. The Zorathians charged, their weapons glowing with energy. Jack fired first, his shots precise, taking down the closest soldiers with quick, clean shots. But there were too many of them. The Zorathians closed in, their numbers overwhelming. Jack knew they couldn't hold them off for long. He had to think quickly. Just as the Zorathians were about to close in on them, Jack activated a device he'd taken from the Vierlian shuttle. The device released a pulse of energy, knocking the Zorathians back and giving Jack and the daughters a moment to escape. They ran, sprinting through the hallways, moving faster than Jack had ever thought possible. His heart was pounding, but he stayed focused on the task at hand. They had to make it out. They had to survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the shuttle. Jack helped the daughters aboard, making sure they were safe before climbing in himself. As the door closed, the shuttle's engines roared to life and they blasted off into the sky. The Zorathian stronghold was left behind, and Jack breathed a sigh of relief. They had made it. The daughters were free, but the battle wasn't over. The Zorathians would come after them, and the Vierlians would need to fight back. But for now, Jack had completed his mission. As the shuttle soared through space, Jack looked at the daughters, who were now safe. They were no longer prisoners. They were free thanks to him. And though the road ahead would be difficult, Jack knew one thing for certain: he had given them a chance at a future. And that was something worth fighting for. The rescue was complete. The redemption was earned. And the Vierlian people had hope once more. The Vierlian shuttle zoomed through the darkness of space, the stars flashing past like pinpricks of light. Jack Dalton sat quietly in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the view outside. He had done what he set out to do. The Vierlian daughters were safe, but the battle was far from over. They had only made it out of the Zorathian stronghold by the skin of their teeth, and the Zorathians were relentless. The Zorathian fleet would be coming after them soon. Lyra, who had remained silent during the escape, now turned to Jack with a determined look in her eyes. "You did it. You saved our daughters, but we cannot stop here. The Zorathians will not give up. We need to strike back." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They had just won a small victory, but the war was far from over. The Vierlian people were in danger, and Jack knew that his role wasn't finished yet. He had helped them escape, but now it was time to fight for the future of an entire race. "We'll need to fight them together," Jack said, his voice steady. He had faced countless enemies in his time, but this was something different. These were the Zorathians, an unstoppable force bent on conquest, but Jack had fought for humanity before, and he would do it again. Now he was fighting for something more. He was fighting for a future that wasn't his own, for a people who had placed their trust in him. The shuttle entered the Vierlian system, and Jack could see the planet below. The peaceful world he had first seen now seemed like a place on the brink of destruction. The Zorathians had already begun their invasion, their massive ships hovering in orbit, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jack could sense the fear in the air, but there was something else too: hope. The Vierlian people had not given up. They would fight for their world, for their daughters, and for their future. As the shuttle landed on the surface, Jack felt the weight of the responsibility settle on his shoulders once more. The battle that awaited them would be unlike anything he had faced before. The Zorathian forces were vast, their technology far more advanced than anything the Vierlians had. But Jack had seen the strength in the Vierlian people. They were not just an advanced race, they were resilient. And that resilience was something the Zorathians could never understand. Lyra and Talon were already waiting for him when he disembarked from the shuttle. "We've prepared everything," Lyra said. "We will launch a counterattack. It's time to take the fight to them." Jack nodded, his gaze hardening. This wasn't just about defending the planet anymore. It was about taking back what the Zorathians had stolen. It was about making them pay for everything they had done. The Vierlian forces were assembling, their fleet preparing for battle. But the true strength of their defense lay not in their ships or weapons, but in the unity of their people. The Vierlian military was small compared to the Zorathians, but they had something that the Zorathians could never match: heart. Jack joined the Virelian Command Center, a large underground bunker filled with holographic displays and intricate maps of the battlefront. Talon was already discussing strategy with the commanders, while Lyra turned to Jack. "Your role in this is vital," she said. "You have fought in battles before. You understand strategy. We will need you to lead a team of soldiers to infiltrate the Zorathian command ship. If we can disable their fleet from the inside, we might have a chance." Jack listened carefully. The plan was risky, but it was the only one they had. The Zorathian command ship was the heart of their operation. If they could take it down, the rest of the fleet would crumble. But getting inside wouldn't be easy. The ship was heavily guarded, and it was surrounded by a swarm of enemy vessels. Jack would need to rely on his training and the technology the Virelians had provided him. "I'm ready," Jack said firmly. The Virelian fleet launched into space, their ships cutting through the dark expanse. Jack's team of soldiers, a mix of humans and Virelians, was stationed on one of the smaller ships. They had trained for this moment, and Jack could see the determination in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for everything they held dear. The Zorathian command ship loomed ahead, a massive fortress of metal and firepower. Its exterior was a mix of dark, jagged metal and glowing energy fields, a symbol of the Zorathians' technological might. But Jack didn't let fear take hold. He had a job to do. He focused on the mission, focusing on every move, every detail. The ship's weapons flared to life as they neared the Zorathian fleet. Jack's team moved quickly, using the ship's advanced cloaking system to remain undetected. They passed through the outer defenses and made their way toward the heart of the command ship. The corridors were dark and silent, the air thick with tension. Jack knew that every step brought them closer to danger. The Zorathians were ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to protect their command center. They reached the central control room, where a team of Zorathian officers monitored the battle. The room was filled with holographic displays and complex machinery. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but he stayed calm. He moved quickly, taking down the guards before they could sound the alarm. The Zorathians didn't expect a human force to infiltrate their command center, and that was to Jack's advantage. With the control room secured, Jack set to work, hacking into the Zorathian systems. It was a delicate process, but with the help of the Virelian technology, he was able to bypass the security protocols. Within minutes, he had access to the fleet's central control system. "Now," Jack said, his voice steady, "it's time to end this." He activated the shutdown sequence, sending a surge of energy through the Zorathian network. The entire fleet began to falter, their ships losing power and their weapons systems shutting down. The Zorathians were caught off guard, unable to respond to the sudden attack. But Jack knew they wouldn't be down for long. He had to get out before the Zorathians could retaliate. He motioned for his team to move, and they quickly made their way back to their ship. The countdown was already ticking, and Jack could hear the sounds of Zorathian reinforcements approaching. They had done their job, but now they needed to get out. The ship's engines roared to life as they launched into space, narrowly avoiding the incoming Zorathian fire. The fleet was in disarray, their ships floating aimlessly as the Virelian forces launched their final assault. Jack could see the Zorathian ships breaking apart, their once impenetrable defenses now crumbling under the Virelian counterattack. As the Zorathian fleet fell apart, Jack allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The battle was won, but there was still much to be done. The Zorathians had been defeated, but their remnants would continue to pose a threat. Jack knew that the war was not over, but for the first time there was hope. The Virelian people had fought back, and they had won. As the Virelian fleet sailed through space, Jack looked out the window at the stars. They had survived. And they would continue to fight, not just for their planet, but for their future. Jack had answered their call, and now he had become a part of their story. The battle for Virelia was over, but Jack knew that the road ahead would be long. The Zorathians may have been defeated, but the fight for freedom, for peace, and for the future of the Virelian people was just beginning. Jack Dalton had become more than just a soldier. He had become a symbol of hope for an entire race. And as the shuttle sped toward Virelia's surface, Jack knew that he had made a difference. He had given the Virelians a future, and that was worth fighting for.